This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Leaders of political parties and organizations around the world hold a summit with the Communist Party of China. Ethiopia notifies Egypt and Sudan that it has begun the second phase of filling its Grand Renaissance Dam. And we examine efforts to combat security challenges in Nigeria and the DRC. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers, and here with the latest in business is Rama.
That's right, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Oil prices jump to multi-year highs after the OPEC Plus standoff leads to a deal failure. And Botswana issues a license for the first large-scale solar power plant in the country. We'll have the details on those stories and plenty more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Hannah.
Thanks, Rama. We'll see you in a bit. Well, more than 500 leaders of political parties and organizations around the world have taken part in a summit with the Communist Party of China. Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, and the Chinese president delivered a keynote speech calling for win-win cooperation and coexistence. Well, joining me now is Professor Peter Kangwanja. He is the president and CEO of the African Policy Institute. Thank you so much for joining us. What are the key takeaways for Africa from the CPC and World Political Party Summit?
I think it's very, very important. As you know, this celebration of the centenary of the CPC is very, very important for Africa. It carries vital lessons for Africa. So from a very broad perspective of the celebration, we do appreciate the lessons we are drawing from China, particularly the fact that stability is key to development. That one is a lesson we always remember, that with the CPC, as China has managed to develop. Now, from the other perspective, there is a comment on the need for development for all sections of humanity, for all civilizations and all cultures. And this idea of equality of access to development is key. That wealth, every part of the world has the right to prosperity. This prosperity needs to be shared, and therefore we are building a community of shared destiny for mankind. And I think that's a very important phrase to remember, because our destiny is shared. Our interests might be diverse, but our destiny is the same. So that destiny must be defined by prosperity. I think the second thing is a question of the independence of each culture and civilization, and the independence of people to define their own path to that destiny. That the path must not be prescribed by any nation or group of nations, that people have the right to define what they mean by democracy, the path they have chosen for themselves to reach that democracy, and what exactly they need at the end. And I think that end is democracy. It's a prosperity.
Professor, how best can party-to-party exchanges be harnessed for the benefit of both Africa and China?
I think the exchange between parties from China and Africa must be part and parcel of the FOCAC process. Why I say so is because we need to learn lessons from parties that have been there for long. In Africa, as you know, our parties have the highest mortality rate. They are created within 3 or 10 years, they are gone. In order to have long-term stability of political parties and therefore stability of nations and their economy and development can be run from what we have learned from China. In 40 years, in exactly 40 years, CPC has led China out of absolute poverty. And that's a huge lesson. And therefore, we need to have more and more interaction between political parties so that we can harness those benefits, those lessons that China has learned. At the same time, China will also learn why African states, our African parties, are lagging behind And this should be part and parcel of the Africa-China cooperation as part and, as an integral part of trying to, cultivate what we are calling that shared prosperity, which is going to create a community of shared destiny for mankind.
Professor, on the back of what you've just said, in China, there's a close link between the system of governance in place and the country's rapid development. Is it possible to replicate this in Africa?
It is possible because there is no other instrument of keeping societal history and memory except a political party. Remember, governments operate on a fiscal year, 1 year after 1 year. The longest they think is 5 years. That's the nature of government. So it is political parties that are the repositories, the custodians of long-term policy making and implementation. So when the CPC sworn itself to keep the dreams of the founding fathers of China, to be faithful to those ideals, what they did is that they committed every government that come, whether it's a government of Chairman Mao or it's the government of President Xi Jinping, they are all bound by that party. You can begin to imagine what happens when you don't have a party. Every government that comes starts from a clean slate, and that cannot be helpful for continued development. Therefore, we need to begin to learn those lessons from China. We have seen in South Africa, they are holding together because their party, the African National Congress, has been there for a long time. But the ANC also need to learn how to sustain itself in power, to avoid disintegration that normally follows independence in Africa. And those lessons can be drawn from the CPC.
Thank you so much for all that, Professor Peter Kagwanja. He is the president and CEO of the African Policy Institute. Well, Kenya has congratulated the Communist Party of China for hitting a milestone of 100 years since its founding. Speaking after attending the CPC and World Political Party Summit, the Secretary General of Kenya's ruling party, Raphael Tuju, applauded the CPC for the role it has played in changing the fortunes of the People's Republic of China. CGTN's Enoch Sekoya reports from Nairobi, Kenya.
At the Jubilee Party headquarters in Nairobi, Party Secretary General Raphael Tuju joined a CPC and World Political Party Summit hosted by China's President Xi Jinping, a meeting where China reiterated its commitment to championing the common values of humanity while shouldering the responsibility to promote development for all. While congratulating the Communist Party of China for steering China to an unprecedented growth in its 100 years of existence, Raphael Tuju said achievements made by the party present a beacon of hope for Kenya and other African countries.
But we should be inspired because this has happened in the lifetime of some of us. It was within my lifetime when China was having half the GDP per capita of Kenya.
The story of the Communist Party of China is that of transformation, with the party overseeing the growth of China to become the second largest economy in the world, with over 700 million Chinese people being lifted out of poverty in record time. Tuju echoed Chinese President Xi Jinping's speech where he called for a multilateral institutional approach aimed at bridging the gap between the rich and poor nations.
We are neighbors, and if your neighbors are poor, there's nobody to build your goods, to buy your goods. So you can be very strong in manufacturing, very strong in whatever it is that you're doing, but if all your neighbors are poor, who is going to buy your products? So I think that he was very clear that we should be talking about prosperity of mankind, not just prosperity of one country over the other.
With Africa being left at the back of the pack as countries race to vaccinate their populations, Tuju applauded China for giving the continent a helping hand. He said Africa must be assisted to vaccinate its people, as well as set up a vaccine manufacturing plant to enable the continent to produce its own jabs.
So that the vaccine manufacturing can happen anywhere in the world where that can be done, so that everybody in the world should have access to that vaccine.
According to Raphael Tuju, the collective goal should be ensuring no one is left behind in the race to shield people against COVID-19. Enoxikolia, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, for more on party-to-party exchanges between China and Africa, earlier we spoke with Dr. Emmanuel Matambo. He is the research director at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg.
This summit is coming at a very important time, not only in the history of the CPC itself, but in the world, as it comes in the midst of a pandemic. So it is of utmost importance, of course, that the rest of the world learns just from how the CPC has grown from a party that was formed by about 50 members to being the biggest political party in the world with about 95 million members. So that is quite a stride. And of course, the CPC since 1949, and especially since 1978, has grown into a party that is not only ideologically sound, but a party that has transformed China from being a third world backwater into the second most biggest economy in the world. So those are just some of the examples from which we can learn. And of course, if we talk about economic returns, if we talk about how China has transformed a country that in 1949 had a per capita GDP of $23 to $10,000 today, and of course, the economy itself, which grew for about 9.5% every year for more than 30 years. Those are just some of the strides to which we should appreciate what the Communist Party of China has done.
Well, let's turn our attention to Ethiopia now, where the government there says despite pressure from some nations, it has accomplished its law enforcement mission in Tigray, delivered aid, and unilaterally declared a ceasefire. Addressing the nation's parliament, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said that the results of his government's decisions in Tigray would give time for stakeholders in the war to consider peace. Here's CGTN's Giram Chala with that report.
Answering questions to the outgoing MPs, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said despite the false narrative of the army left because it was defeated, the decision to leave Tigray was made to give the people there and others time for reflection.
The truth of the matter is it's a must to give time for reflection, especially for our people in Tigray. We have to allow farmers to do their work, and we must not be the reason to prevent that activity. We should not be blamed for human rights abuses anymore. We have done lots of positive things in Tigray, including the training, arming, and assignment of a police force there. The army is not city police and has its own missions, and that is concluded for now. We've decided it cannot be fatigued. We will see what will be the result of this decision sooner than later.
Abiy said some in the international community were unfair to Ethiopia and even tried to sabotage the constitutional order and the leadership of the country, aiming at a regime change.
We won't be walking on the road others paved for us. We know some nations have attempted a regime change. Our message for such a nation is as long as Ethiopia stands still, the issue of individuals holding power is secondary to us. Instead of being a mercenary government, we 100% choose to face whatever challenge comes our way. But that has no benefits. The people of Ethiopia have already expressed their desire.
The Prime Minister and the Parliament as a whole applauded what they called a remarkable job done by the Ethiopian National Defense Force. Abiy promised the army can still deliver on any front.
Ethiopian Defense Forces may not have F-22s. An army that can do information warfare may not be equipped with the latest GPS technology, may not have Su-35 or Rafale fighter jets or the latest missiles or nuclear bombs. But one thing I can tell you for a fact is that the kind of bravery the Ethiopian army has, no one else has. That's a fact.
TPLF in Tigray has reportedly put 7 preconditions to be fulfilled before any peace talks can begin. Budget release, electricity and network services provision, and the release of prisoners are among them. Addis Ababa so far has officially said nothing on this, but some authorities said what Ethiopia calls a terrorist group must first respect the constitution of the land before expecting anything from the government. Group Tala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
South Africa's governing ANC party has come out strongly to reaffirm its commitment to the country's constitution and rule of law. The move follows the sentencing of former president and ANC leader Jacob Zuma to 15 months in prison for failing to appear at a corruption inquiry. CGTN's Lisa Njamela reports.
The ANC National Executive Committee met for the first time since former President Jacob Zuma was handed a prison sentence. Zuma was sentenced to 15 months in prison by the Constitutional Court for contempt. He had failed to appear at a commission investigating allegations of corruption during his time in office.
The NEC noted that while there may be different responses on details of this situation, there are aspects that the ANC and society agree on. These include our unequivocal commitment to and defense of the Constitution, in particular the supremacy of the Constitution, the rule of law, and the independence of the judiciary, amongst the founding principles and values of the Republic. The meeting stressed that it must always be clear that the interests of an individual cannot take precedence over or jeopardize the interests of our democracy or that of the nation.
Zuma has since asked the court to reconsider its decision to jail him.
President Zuma is exploring every legal avenue that is available to reduce or to remove the custodial the custodial sentence that has been put on him. And I think that in the view of the ANC, and we've said so in our statement, we respect the rule of law. We believe that the judiciary must be left to make its own decisions.
Once the prison term was pronounced by the Constitutional Court, hundreds of people gathered outside the former president's home in Gandla in KwaZulu-Natal province. They undertook to defend him should the police try to arrest him. Duarte condemned them for not adhering to COVID-19 lockdown regulations. She says the flouting of COVID-19 regulations, threats of civil war and lawlessness in Gandla were all engineered from within the party, and that those responsible will be disciplined by the party.
It's pretty obvious that there are certain people in the ANC who take a leading role from various provinces who stimulate the kind of ill discipline that we see. They also do it in their own provinces.
The Deputy Secretary General also emphasized that what happened outside the former president's home does not represent a popular uprising. Lisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Time now for us to take a short break. More news when we return, including Ethiopia notifies Egypt and Sudan that it has begun the second phase of filling its Grand Renaissance Dam. And we examine efforts to combat security challenges in Nigeria and the DRC.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt,
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Ethiopia has begun the second phase of filling the Grand Renaissance Dam. According to the country's Ministry of Water, the filling is being done in accordance with the original plan of the mega dam's construction. The ministry further says the country officially notified downstream nations, Egypt and Sudan, about its intentions. However, Egypt has rejected this move. The issue is set to be addressed on Thursday with the UN Security Council. Following these developments are Girim Chala in Addis Ababa and Adel Amrouhi in Cairo.
The timing is depicted through
two important things. One, it is a rainy season, the wet season in Ethiopia at the moment. A lot of rain is coming, so it is a favorable condition for the country to proceed and fill the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam for the second time. And the other issue, the most important issue, is this is a schedule that the three countries agreed upon when it comes to filling the dam. And last time it was filled, it was almost in the same time frame. And this time around, it's going to be, by the way, holding 13.5 billion cubic meters of water on the dam itself, the reservoir. And generally, the cumulative water that is going to be kept in the reservoir of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam will be more than 18 billion cubic meters of water. So for Ethiopia, it is about time. For Ethiopia, it's also about making this Grand Renaissance Dam start power generation. That's the ultimate goal. Also provide electricity, not only for itself, but also for the region, including other countries far away from the region. So it is about time, and that's what's happening according to authorities, by the way. I've been trying to speak to the Ethiopian Water, Irrigation and Energy Ministry officials there, people who've been part of the negotiation process have been telling us that, look, Ethiopia has been open for negotiation. Ethiopia is the one in the first place, even at this round, who officially pronounced the resuming of the filling of the Grand Renaissance Dam for the second time. And the official communication has been made for Egyptian authorities and Sudanese authorities at the same time. So at this moment in time, this is all about development. Ethiopia has been saying time and again that there is no reason why we have to affect Egypt or Sudan. This water should be shared amongst ourselves, but a colonial era agreement that is going to allow only Egypt or Sudan to use this water, Ethiopia sidelined, is not going to be accepted. Ethiopia is determined to finish it, but when it does, that it's not going to affect any country in the process. Now it is ready to talk, and any binding agreement should not prevent the nation from further using of the water, not only the Grand Renaissance Dam, but the negotiation should be all-inclusive, fair, and practical at the same time. So negotiations can continue. Ethiopian authorities are saying they are ready anytime, anywhere.
The negotiations have not been going well at all from the Egyptian and the Sudanese perspective. They were stumbling, and they failed to reach a final legal binding agreement between the three nations, something that Egypt and Sudan have been persisting and trying to push forward for, to have a document that gives abidance of all three parties to a certain set of regulations that all three countries want. So how will this impact? It definitely won't make it better, because now Ethiopia proceeds with the second filling of its reservoir, which is expected to be much bigger in terms of water volume, to be reserved behind the dam and therefore hindered from the flow in the Nile River to Sudan and to Egypt. In response to the official letter that the Egyptian irrigation minister received from his Ethiopian counterpart, Egypt officially rejected Ethiopia's move, describing it as a unilateral move. And on the other side, the Egyptian foreign minister has also forwarded this Egyptian official rejections to the UN Security Council, and already there is a scheduled session this coming Thursday, which Sudan and Egypt both have been calling for, to discuss the developments in the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance and Nile water talks with Ethiopia. Egypt and Sudan have resorted to the African Union, which sponsor talks have not reached any agreement that pleases both countries. There have been international mediation. The United States has entered. Negotiators from Europe as well have participated, and still nothing has been achieved, which has led also to some officials from the White House to criticize the Ethiopian stance. So what is next is basically, from a Sudanese perspective, for example, they say that they have all options on the table. Egypt, on the other hand, believes that politics is the only way out from it, but this has not been helping for some time, but definitely the next Security Council meeting will shape more the vision about what the international community is willing to do, or how it would like to intervene in this diplomatic crisis.
Well, following the latest abduction of students in Nigeria's Kaduna state, the number of school children kidnapped across the country since December has risen to about 1,000. Experts say the government will need to intensify efforts to reduce the impact of such attacks on the education sector. Correspondent Philia Haza tells us more from Abuja.
The Kaduna Police Command says 26 of the students have been rescued after security personnel launched a search operation for the over 100 victims kidnapped from a secondary school. The state government has assured parents and relatives of the abducted students that every resource and personnel will be deployed to ensure their safe return. 13 schools in the region have also been shut down indefinitely as a way to reduce the threat of kidnapping in schools. This is the latest abduction of students by unknown gunmen in northern Nigeria. More than 150 students are yet to be rescued from their captors after a kidnapping incident in May in Niger State. Experts say more needs to be done to end the spate of kidnappings and insecurity in the country.
This is something that must be treated as a national security emergency. It has to be an all-out war, a concise surgical military operation with clinical precision to take out criminal headsmen from our communities, from our towns, from our villages, and decimate them as much as possible, secure our borders, tighten border security, and make sure we do not see influx of people across the border.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has condemned the Kaduna attack, describing the incident as cowardly and despicable. He says the assault on schools is threatening to undermine efforts in boosting school enrollment in states that were lagging behind. It's a huge setback for the country's already struggling education sector.
Northern Nigeria has been classified from the early 70s as an educationally disadvantaged region in Nigeria, so requiring certain, form of affirmative actions to prop up more access to education for children from Northern Nigeria. And so with this latest onslaught on educational facilities, of course, the North will sink deeper into educational depression, such that all gains made in the last 50 years to lift the North out of educational disadvantage would have been reversed substantially.
In March, President Muhammadu Buhari directed all security agencies, including the nation's immigration service, to tighten surveillance and control around the country's borders. On Tuesday, the president directed the military and police to act swiftly in finding and rescuing all abducted school children in the affected states. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Over in the Democratic Republic of Congo, authorities say 22 people have been killed in the northeastern part of Ituri. 14 of them were killed in fighting between the army and a militia group. 8 others suspected of collaborating with rebels were lynched over the weekend. CGTN's Kucha Mringa reports from Kinshasa.
Local officials say fighters of a rebel group called the Cooperative for the Development of Congo, Cote, attacked 3 villages in Jugu territory and killed some residents. Fighting broke out between the rebels and the Congolese army that left 14 people dead. The army says 8 civilians suspected of collaborating with the rebels were lynched in public. Codeco is a rebel group composed of fighters from a community of farmers known as the Lendu. They've had a long history of rivalry with a community of herders called the Hema. Disputes over land and the control of minerals have sparked conflict between them. The UN Refugee Agency says more than 5,000 people have been forced to flee Ituri province this year due to rebel attacks. The DRC government declared martial law in Ituri and North Kivu province in early May to try and end the insecurity. But attacks on unarmed people have continued. Chris Sochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Let's revisit our top story now. More than 500 leaders of political parties and organizations around the world have taken part in a summit with the Communist Party of China. Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee and the Chinese President, delivered a keynote speech calling for win-win cooperation and coexistence. Wu Geshe reports from the Great Hall of the People.
President of the People's Republic.
A virtual gathering of the Communist Party of China and its global friends. Chinese President Xi Jinping spoke from the Golden Hall of the Great Hall of People.
Today, human society is once again at a historic crossroads. Hostile confrontation or mutual respect, isolationism or openness, decoupling or cooperation, zero-sum games or mutual benefit. The choice is in our hands and the responsibility falls on our shoulders.
facing challenges brought by changes unseen in a century and the global COVID-19 pandemic. President Xi called for political parties to better shoulder their responsibilities through mutual learning. 21 guest speakers, most of them leaders of ruling parties and heads of government, also expressed their thoughts.
Through measures like the Belt and Road Initiative and extensive skills development, China continues to support economic reform, instructive development, enhanced trade, and greater integration amongst African economies.
The summit was attended by parties and political organizations from over 160 countries. More than 100 sub-venues have been set up across the world. These hundreds of political party flags come in different colors and designs and remind us that whatever difference our values are, we can always sit down and talk. That's also what the CPC says it hopes to achieve, a new type of party-to-party relationship that seeks to expand common ground while resolving differences and enhancing mutual respect and learning. Wu Guoxiu, CGTN, Beijing.
Let's head over to South Africa now, where there's been a mixed reaction to the approval of China's Sinovac jab. Health authorities have welcomed the move, but medical experts have urged caution with limited data available on the vaccine's effectiveness against variants circulating locally. Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer have so far been the only vaccines registered for use. South Africa is now looking to include other vaccines as it races to inoculate its population. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
The approval of China's Sinovac for emergency use in South Africa has been applauded as a turning point in its vaccine rollout. There's an urgency to get more vaccines as infections soar in a relentless third wave. But medical experts have warned against using vaccines that haven't yet been properly tested.
There's not enough data on Sinovac regarding our beta variant. For now, we know the Delta variant is the most prominent variant out there in South Africa. We need those data on Sinovac regarding our beta variant. Also, if we look at countries where Sinovac has already been used, countries like Chile and Seychelles, we need to look at what happened there and what are their reinfection rate.
South Africa's coronavirus cases have surpassed 2 million and the numbers are still climbing. Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson's are the only two vaccines that have been used so far.
From the point of view that you have 3 vaccines, it can become quite difficult going forward with the rollout. There's also 2 dosages between 14 and 28 days apart. It's got different storage requirements than your Pfizer and your Johnson & Johnson. And again, that might be a problem with some of the sites.
Vaccines are continuing to roll into the country, but they might be too little to stem the latest tide of infections.
We don't expect that the vaccines currently would protect us from the third wave itself from a population perspective. It might protect the individual who gets the vaccine, but that individual also still needs full vaccination for protected and have the benefit of the vaccine.
Just 5% of 60 million people have been vaccinated so far. The program is being stepped up with Johnson & Johnson's and Pfizer, but it's still too early to tell how soon Sinovac will arrive in the country and how much South Africa will acquire. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
In Cote d'Ivoire, health authorities have launched a campaign to vaccinate 1 million people against COVID-19 in the next 10 days. The initiative entails the use of mobile clinics to reach citizens in busy parts of commercial capital Abidjan. Launched on Monday, the mobile clinics are now operating in areas such as markets. Officials say the inoculation campaign is bearing fruit, with more people accepting the vaccine. The West African country has so far received about 1 million doses of AstraZeneca, Pfizer and Sinopharm vaccines. Since March, around 800,000 people have been inoculated. The country is also expecting another 1.2 million doses in the coming days. Uganda's Ministry of Health says different variants of COVID-19 are responsible for causing a surge in critical cases in recent weeks. The country is going through a severe second wave, with hospital admissions hitting 120 people per day, the majority of them younger people. CGTN's Isabel Nakira has that story.
39-year-old Aaron Nsamba was diagnosed with COVID-19 a month ago. Though well now, he's been advised by doctors to blow a balloon to exercise his lungs. Aaron suffered from chest pain and breathing difficulties 3 days after being diagnosed. He was immediately taken into ICU in a private facility in Kampala.
Did the X-ray and told me your lungs are depleted. You too much, as in you have so much mucus. You have to do. There's a thing he put on me to suck out some of the mucus. That was a variable. Okay, I don't know how they do it, what he did, but he put on something and it helped really.
Aaron was put on oxygen therapy for 5 days, consuming a cylinder of oxygen each day. He feared the hospital would run out of oxygen, with health facilities under severe pressure.
Morning comes, the doctor comes in, looks at me, runs out, goes, calls a friend, they come. Look at the things, look at the data, they run out. Like, what is wrong? Then one of them gets the courage and says, Aaron, I think we are losing you.
Aaron is among hundreds of younger people in Uganda who have been severely affected by the coronavirus during this new wave.
Public hospitals are struggling to cope with about 1,000 seriously ill patients. Desperate patients with no options are running to the private facilities, which not many can afford.
The Ministry of Health has also recorded 5 different variants of the coronavirus in Uganda. The most common is the Delta variant, first detected in India.
From our observations, we have noted increased transmissibility, resulting in a fast-moving outbreak, more severe clinical presentations of new cases, and unfortunately, resulting in poor clinical outcomes.
Public health officials say the majority of the cases are in people under the age of 40. In the previous wave, the elderly were most affected. The country is back in a strict lockdown. Authorities said tighter restrictions become necessary after many businesses are operating illegally. The government now admits it's been caught unprepared to equip public hospitals with oxygen and ICU beds.
Because as of now, we are making for 200 patients. But when your numbers continue increasing, we will not have the oxygen to meet the demand of the 900 bed capacity that we have here.
Some private companies are supporting the public hospitals by providing free oxygen. Uganda has vaccinated just 0.1% of its population and has a limited supply of vaccines. Aaron was lucky to get treatment in a private facility. But other Ugandans face a limited capacity of oxygen and ICU beds in public hospitals. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, I'll be standing by to bring you more news, but for now, let's take a look at what's happening in the world of business with Rama.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in business news. Oil prices jumped to a 6-year high after the OPEC Plus standoff leads to a deal failure. And Botswana issues its license for the first large-scale solar power plant in the country.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to the program. So let's start in the world of energy. Oil prices soared on Tuesday after major producers, including Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, fell out rather dramatically over plans to increase production. The U.S. oil benchmark, WTI, or West Texas Intermediate crude futures, were up 1.6% to $76.38 a barrel. At one point, it actually came very, very close, within 2 US cents of $77 a barrel. That was the highest price since November 2014. Now, the price of Brent crude, another global benchmark that has gone up by nearly 50% so far this year, was also up about 0.2%, $77.32 a barrel. That's the highest level since late 2018. Now, this surge comes after OPEC and its allies, including Russia, cancelled a meeting on Monday to discuss plans to add some 2 million barrels per day of output into the market between August and December. Talks were carried over from last week, and no new date for the next meeting has been set. Energy of a different kind now. Botswana's energy regulators granted a generation license for a 100 megawatt solar power plant to the local energy firm Shumba Energy. It's going to be setting up the country's first large-scale solar PV plant. Now, Botswana doesn't currently have large-scale solar power generation. Its 600 megawatts national energy demand is met mostly by state-owned coal-fired power plants and imports primarily from South Africa and Mozambique. Locally listed Shumba Energy plans to implement the project in 2 phases. Construction of the first phase of 50 megawatts is likely to start in the next 6 months. With 212 billion tons of coal reserves, fossil fuel is expected to continue to dominate power generation in Botswana, at least in the near future. Investors, however, have raised concerns about the heavy dependence of African countries on coal-based power, which release millions of tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. Let's head further north now. The Suez Canal authorities say that the Ever Given container ship, you remember that vessel, the one that was impounded by Egypt after it blocked the Suez Canal for nearly a week, that ship will now be released on Wednesday, the 7th of July. Egypt signed a non-disclosure agreement last week with Shoei Kisen-Kaisha, it's the Japanese owner of the Ever Given. Egypt had sought hundreds of millions of dollars in compensation, but it later cut its initial claim of $900 million to $550 million. The 400-meter-long container vessel was passing through the single-lane portion of the Suez Canal on the 23rd of March when it veered off course and literally got stuck diagonally across the canal during a sandstorm, with its bow stuck into one end of it. It remained wedged there for 6 days, blocking off a vital route between Europe and Asia and disrupting global trade. The Canal Authority reported that revenue lost during the time that the Ever Given was stuck amounted to anywhere between $12 to $15 million every day. On to South Africa now. The Liquor Brand Owners Association there is requesting extended payment terms on its excise duties, currently due to the country's taxman. Now, the association is also requesting that should the government decide to extend the current ban on the sale of alcohol beyond the initial 14 days, and that incidentally ends on the 11th of July, then the deferment will be applicable for the entire period until the ban is lifted. Now, the association represents major alcohol manufacturers. It says that the liquor industry is facing a critical financial crisis. It estimates that the current 2-week restriction will result in the loss of over $420 million in retail sales. That's roughly 4.1% of projected sales value for 2021. The Chinese-built Ethiopia-Djibouti rail line has so far moved over 3.45 million tons of goods in the last 3 years. That rail line is a key logistics route for the landlocked Horn of Africa state. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala with the details.
The Ethiopia-Djibouti electrified rail, which connects landlocked Ethiopia to Djibouti port, has been improving its efficiency by 25 to 30% every year since it went operational in October 2015. That is according to official reports. The railway transported 800,000 tons of commodities in the first year of operation and then increased its capacity to 1.2 million and 1.45 million tons in the next 2 successive years. And it has mainly transported machinery, vehicles, fertilizers, commercial goods and commodities imported by the private sector operators and the Ethiopian Shipping and Logistic Services Enterprise. By the way, this multi-billion-dollar cross-country railway project was financed 70% by the soft loan found from the Exim Bank of China and was constructed by the China state companies CREC and CCECC. Reports suggest that the electrified transnational railway earned $29 million in 9 months. The Ethiopia-Djibouti railway currently provides different kinds of freight services, including the transportation of perishable goods, vehicles, cereals and fertilizers, as well as transportation of passengers, service which began in October 2016. Grumjara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Two quick stories outside the continent. These are from China. The government over there says it will crack down on illegal activities in the securities market. The cabinet today said that the government will strengthen supervision and improve regulations on cross-border data flows and security while handing out severe punishment for activities like fraudulent securities issuance, market manipulation and insider trading. Other measures include development of a capital markets credit system and the enforcement of securities law for Chinese firms listed outside the country. And finally, the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang held talks with over 30 representatives of the UK business community in Beijing on Tuesday. In a video meeting, Li says that China and the UK are important forces when it comes to world peace, promoting common development and safeguarding the multilateral trading system. He says China hopes to promote a healthy and stable relationship with the UK, one that will help maintain free and fair trade and promote a global economic recovery. China hopes that the UK will provide a fair, unbiased environment for Chinese firms investing there. Li says China is willing to step up exchanges with the UK on COVID-19 research, particularly with regard to new variants of the virus. And I'll leave it there for the time being, but I'll be back at the top of the hour. In Global Business, we'll be exploring the impact of this unexpected stalemate in the OPEC Plus meeting and the effect that's having on oil prices. Ministers of the world's top leading crude producers and allies, as I mentioned, called off all output talks last Monday, and there's no new dates to resume them. So with no increase in production, what happens next, especially as the global energy markets tighten up at an even faster pace than anticipated? We'll discuss that and plenty more at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Hannah.
Thanks, Rama. We'll see you then. Let's take a short break and return. Here's what's coming up. The link between food shortages, water scarcity, and desertification in Algeria.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Cote, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
We head over to Algeria now, where farmers there are concerned of water scarcity, which they say is a result of severe desertification. Algeria is the largest country in North Africa and is 80% desert. The situation has posed food production challenges that have seen Algeria spending billions of dollars in food imports. Here's CGTN's Wanda Mugai with that report.
Farmers in Algeria decry a worsening climate disaster. In the Tazuz region, about 600 kilometers from the capital Algiers, water levels have gone so low that there is not enough for farmers like Aissa Ghazou.
Currently, we're experiencing an unprecedented water shortage. There is no water here. Every time we buy water tanks at exorbitant prices in order to save our agriculture. The water that we buy is just to keep them alive and that they don't die. And we are looking for yield. And believe me, it is very difficult. And we have never seen anything like this before.
Aissa has resorted to water harvesting to sustain his farming. For him, every drop counts. He has managed to harness a little that comes through rainfall and some from the underground. He believes that if anything should change, it trickles down to government intervention.
The solution, in my opinion, exists. It is easy and simple, and it is up to the Algerian state to dig artesian wells. And studies have shown that the region has a great wealth of water that awaits to be exploited to make this place a paradise on earth.
In the 1970s, late President Houari Boumediene started a reforestation project to combat desertification in the North African country, the Great Green Dam. However, in Aissa's opinion, it hasn't achieved much.
The Green Dam project and all other projects alone cannot stop desertification and combat drought. There must be a great practical plan that touches all parts of the country.
The largest country in North Africa struggles with food security, thus relying largely on imports. Algeria spent $2.8 billion on food imports in 2005, including $1.2 billion for cereals. Most of its water supply comes from underground. Experts and farmers believe, if well tapped, could go a long way in solving the crisis. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
We begin our sports coverage in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, where a small football academy has produced one of the best players for the national team's under-17 side. Many talented youngsters don't have the funds to pay for training, but at this academy, the coaches found a way of providing it to some teenagers for free. CGTN's Cote brings us their story.
Jonas Nigusi has joined his local teammates for training. He's just back from Israel, where the Ethiopia under-17 national team had a friendly match.
It is very great. I feel great since I'm representing Ethiopia.
Jonas joined the Haleta Football Academy in Addis Ababa 2 years ago after he saw it on social media. This despite living 700 kilometers from the city. He had to find a relative to stay with in the capital.
It is very hard for me to be away from my family, but I'm trying my best to succeed.
Abi Kasahun is the founder and head coach of Haleta Academy. He says he has at least 25 trainees like Jonas.
In our academy, in under-17, there is no payment. We support the players by sponsor.
The academy, however, collects training fees from the other 50 players who are between the ages of 6 and 15. Jonas is now an icon at the academy. Johannes has now become a great inspiration to his fellow team members, and many of them are hoping that they too can make it to the national team. And others want even more.
Everyone wants to be good, but I want to be better. Like I want to make it to the top, play professionally for Ethiopia, or even abroad, like for biggest teams in Africa or Europe. I want to make it to the top.
Haleta is one of the few football academies in the city, aiming to nurture football talent from children as young as 6 years old. Many such academies do not survive because they lack financial sustainability. But Jonas has made this particular one stand out.
I'm very proud, and the next time there's a lot of Jonas to produce.
Jonas says he is ready to juggle whatever challenges come his way to make sure he succeeds. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Over in Zimbabwe, COVID-19-induced lockdowns have led to a dry spell within the country's sports sector. Travel is restricted and tournaments are minimal. However, a local group of martial arts enthusiasts is targeting a return to normalcy by returning to competition virtually.
In the midst of COVID-19-induced travel restrictions, a group of martial arts enthusiasts at the Zim Ninja Academy have made the most of technology to advance their participation in international competitions. By filming their performances and sending them for submission, they're able to compete with the world's best without leaving the comfort of their training arena.
Keeping blaming COVID and lockdowns is something which is not good. So we need to move. We need to adapt to what's going on. So I think other karate members out there should just try and adapt not to wait and see where COVID will end.
The martial arts practitioners have taken part in 3 virtual international tournaments since the start of the year, picking up several accolades in the process. This has been a major cause for optimism for these Zimbabwean sportsmen and women.
I have this belief in my mind that there will come a time when we will be called to other countries just to go and represent the nation. Because from what I've noticed from the analysis, yes, people have been grounded, but as Zim Ninja Academy, we have managed to compete. So I know many people are seeing the mark that we have left.
The Academy's founder now believes that some of the COVID-19 restrictions may in fact have come as a blessing in disguise.
Previous years, myself alone, without including even the students, I would fail to travel due to lack of sponsorship. But now even my students managed to compete because we're just sending our videos and they will be judged by various qualified international judges around the world. So it was quite an advantage for us, and this platform actually helped us to showcase our talents to the rest of the world.
Mahemutua, CGTN.
Karolina Pliskova pushed through almost a decade of trying before reaching the semifinals at Wembley and barely struggled on Tuesday in a rapid-fire 6-2, 6-2 win over little-known Victoria Golubic. Neither player had even made it to the last 8 of Wimbledon before this week, but it was Czech Pliskova who made the most of the occasion. With a torrential downpour drowning out the noise below, Golubic saw her game unravel after saving a break point to draw level at 2-2. 8th seed Pliskova stormed through the next 7 games, taking the first set 6-2 and moving ahead in the second 3-love. Golubic tried her best but simply could not match her opponent, who sealed the win when her Swiss opponent hit a forehand into the tramlins. Up next is Belarusian 2nd seed Ariana Sabalenka for a place in Saturday's final. Well, that's it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember that you can send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. For me, Hannah Viviers, and the rest of the Africa Live team, thank you so much for watching. Rama is up next with Global Business.